The following podcast is a Dear Media production.
I am obsessed. JVN is here. This is like a really big deal, everybody.
Hi.
Hi, you podcast hoe.
Yes.
Do you feel like you're a podcast hoe lately?
Lately.
Yeah. Well, like since 2000, you're a podcast pioneer.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like
you invented podcasts.
Like I do actually feel like a podcast hoe now that you say it.
I feel like a podcast hoe all the time.
I just feel like I've been turned inside out, all over everywhere. Just everyone sees everything, for all these years.
For all these years.
Yes. I have like the podcast equivalent of like the most gigantic rosebud that's ever existed.
Really?
Yeah. Do you know what that is?
No, I don't. That's why I was transitioning.
It's when someone engages in so much anal sex that they get this like huge prolapsed asshole.
Yeah.
And it's called a rosebud. And you just get this like huge red thing that like falls out of your butt.
That's what it's like the medical term for it?
No.
Okay.
I think that's like what it's like. It's called a rosebud. Girl.
A rosebud.
Like, you've never heard.
So it looks ugly. Then.
It's like honestly, I don't want to like body shame anyone because like it's.
But if you see somebody with a rosebud, you're out.
It's just like some people, it's like a sign of beauty. In some cultures, it's a sign of beauty. For me, it's like kind of one of my biggest fears.
Like if you, well, now you're married. But
like,
if
I don't ever want to look down there and be like, what the hell?
But if you were with this hot guy, they bent over, rosebud, asshole.
I'm thinking you got to appreciate the culture.
Like you lean in.
Yes.
But aren't you scared to like hurt it more or rosebud it more?
They seem to be pretty like resilient. If you're able to get there in the first place, like you could.
They can deal with that.
Yeah.
Did you ever have a rosebud?
No, mine's always like been able to just be like, mine's always been like internal. It's probably one internally.
So you have a good butthole.
It's like intact.
Did you bleach it ever?
No, but I do gently exfoliate the outside, loosely, like with just like loose. I never put exfoliant in my hole. But I do like loose. I actually explained this in my stand-up show, Fun and Slutty, because at the end, I do a live tutorial on how to prep for anal.
Oh,
but only after I do a crowd survey of like who's into anal and then who's curious about anal but doesn't know how to get ready. And then, it's usually not that many people. People are a little nervous.
Do you exfoliate with a face exfoliator or a body exfoliator?
No, I usually do I've used the Cora turmeric exfoliant by Miranda Kerr. I've used that. And I've also used.
I could see Miranda using that.
That's a face one. But then I've used the Herbivore coconut body scrub on. And so what I like to do is I like to hit a little yogi squat in the shower. I do a little malasana. I drop down and I just do gentle buffing circles, like all on my whole crack. And I will say, between that and getting a bidet.
First of all, that's kind of you to really maintain the area.
Yeah, I do. But I learned that because I was like, my butt, like it's like not giving me like the same even color that I want it to. And
how do you know?
Because I bend over
do you
and
mirror
you pull
it?
your cheeks apart.
No,
and you look
stop.
In a full length
You
mirror.
do that often?
You don't look at your
No,
butthole?
I don't.
Oh yeah, at least 3 times a week.
Let's go back. Before all the anal.
Yes, before all the
anal. For people, because I want people to get to know you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like you're more than just.
This is anal fucking sex, you guys. Not that much more, but like a little bit.
Just a tiny bit more.
Yeah.
So you grew up in Illinois.
Yeah.
Was it conservative?
Yes.
Oh, it was.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so what was that like for you?
So much fun.
But now you're living in Texas. That's what I'm kind of.
So much fun.
Yeah, so much fun.
It was never like a fucking, oasis for queer people, but Austin was a little like is more liberal. And I did feel like good there.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't feel, in 2020, there was like not that many anti-queer laws. And then 2021, they, tried a couple. And then 2022, they tried a couple more. And then this year, like this legislative session, they did like 500, or no, that's in the US. But in Texas, there was hundreds. I mean, an unbelievable amount of tests. This year I started feeling really targeted in Texas, but when I first came, it wasn't amazing, but I felt like I could
You feel targeted, like personally, like if you go out?
I feel a little less safe.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Feel a little less welcome. But that's, it's hard to feel welcome as a non-binary trans person when there's drag. I mean, I'm a comedian. Like I wear the clothes that I wear when I perform. There was a law that was struck down, but they passed a law that was going to ban drag performances. Like, if it could be any place in like where a minor could potentially see. So like I would be a drag performance because I'd be wearing a dress. So that means like I couldn't, go read my children's book.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't, like in my stand-up comedy show, like isn't for kids anyway, but like I couldn't like,
right. You ask who does,
but it's like I couldn't
there,
read, but it's like I couldn't read my book. Like I couldn't like read Peanut Goes for the Gold. I couldn't like do things that are totally fine and above board all
that
ages.
didn't pass.
Well, it got struck down by a federal judge, but the drag bans we've had more luck getting those banned, but a lot of the trans bans and gender affirming care bans have been allowed to go into effect in district court. So I think we're really likely to see that head to the Supreme Court next year, because we've had some district court of appeals rule against the bans being able to go in place, but then other ones have let them go into effect. So anytime like district courts have like competing rulings, like that usually fast tracks it to the Supreme Court. So we're going to be seeing this same Supreme Court that, you know, overruled Roe v. Wade. They're going to be ruling on gender affirming care for minors, and it's going to be a thing.
When is that going to happen?
I'm guessing next year. I mean, they haven't officially picked it up yet, but just the fact that like, I think like the First Circuit and the Sixth and the Eighth Circuit, I could be misspeaking here, but there certain circuits have ruled competing rulings. So some have said, yeah, these gender affirming care bans can go into effect. And other ones have said they can't because they're unconstitutional. And so now that question of whether or not these, you know, gender affirming care bans are constitutional or not are going to be going to the Supreme Court.
And you've been doing so much activism for this. Like, did young Jonathan do you ever see yourself being in this place?
I've always been really passionate about queer rights and really aware of queer rights. I mean, I grew up in the HIV/AIDS crisis. I grew up in like the age of like DOMA, which was like, you know, the Defense of Marriage Act that was passed in the Clinton era. So, I mean, the hot topic of conversation in my rural space was like, you know, like I believe that marriage is between a man and a woman. Like, no, I don't think that. I mean, people were just really full face like, yeah, no, you shouldn't be able to have the same rights as me. Like maybe we should call it civil unions and you get the tax breaks and you can go into the hospital room, but no, like it can't be like, and I mean, I think we're going to see that play out too, because even in the Dobbs decision, Clarence Thomas said we should revisit marriage equality and even sodomy laws and return those to states' rights as well. So Justice Thomas has already, you know, floated that idea, but I've always been someone who has been really passionate about current events, really passionate about queer rights, really passionate about equality, women's rights, and just passionate generally about like the world around me. So I was like that as a kid.
You were?
Yes.
Is there a second coming out with being non-binary where you have to kind of have that conversation?
Yeah. I mean, by the time I like had language for my non-binary identity, I was already like, you know, like 30. Or like 31. So, and I'd already like kind of established my own shit by then.
Right.
So that wasn't so much of like, and I write a lot about that, of my gender expression journey in my second book, Love That Story, because like I was always very like fluid and like wanting to wear evening gowns and really, like I said, like cutting like, you know, off the shoulder sweatshirts and wanting to wear tights and like, yeah. But like I always had like a very like much more feminine, much more, you know, fluid or like woman associated like inclination towards dress. That was always like really heavily discouraged, you know, from like adults and like, you know, family. And then, you know, later as I kind of realized more about my sexuality, that I was like attracted to men. It's like, even in that time, you know, there's only like 3 guys on gay.com or like, you know, the AOL chat rooms that were in like a 300-mile radius that you could somehow potentially like hook up with.
Yeah.
But I mean, femininity has never really been something, especially then, that was super celebrated within the gay community. So if you were going to express your femininity, like that was like really lowering the chances that you had of like getting dick. And I really, getting dick. And when you're living in a rural space is a full-time job, you got to be really committed. And so I really kind of
you have to change?
Yeah. And even all my 20s, like I had wigs, I had boots, I had heels, I had tights. That shit was always hidden in a closet. Like I never wanted a guy to like see that when I was like, yeah. Cause it's so, and then I think once I really was in the throes of sexual compulsivity and really dealing with that, I was like, I realized I like didn't want to sacrifice myself anymore for sexual validation that was like so fleeting. And like, I would say like, you know, once I sucked enough dick that there was like a comma in the number, I was like, you know, I don't really want to sacrifice myself anymore for this like hollow ass like thing that I just don't even feel good. And it's like, I've just seen every dick there is to see over the age of 20. I don't care. Like these guys are, I just want someone to see like me fully, as opposed to like just this, you know, person that's like trying to get validated. So then more in like my late 20s, I think mid to late 20s, as I started to like heal more, then I think I came more fully into my gender expression. And then as I started to like make other gender queer and non-binary and gender non-conforming friends and started like hearing them talk about it, and just my world opened up so much when Queer Eye happened. And so I met so many other people in my community where I was like, oh my God, that's how I felt my whole life.
Like,
and
I don't have to hide this anymore.
Not even that I had to hide, but I already knew I didn't have to hide it, like in my like, mid 20s. And I was more myself as I healed more. But once I made made gender queer friends and made like non-binary friends, that's when I learned the language and was like, oh my God, that's me too. Like, that's how I've always felt. But that wasn't until like after Queer Eye.
You did have a pretty complicated, life growing up and college and all of that. How are you this like ray of sunshine today that we all know you to be?
Well, I'm not really. If you read my comments, you'll see I can be a cunt. Like I, tell people I'll just, type back nothing but middle fingers, like sure Jan, like, get fucked. Like the comments can get reported sometimes, because it's giving like violating community guidelines.
Yeah.
So I'm not always a ray of sunshine.
You try to be.
And well, no, not even. I think in both my books, that's one thing that I really like about writing, and like whether it's writing or stand-up comedy or even podcasting, like I can be a fuller version of myself. And on Queer, and this is something I write a lot about, like I'm so grateful to Queer Eye and I love Queer Eye, and like who you see on Queer Eye is who I am, but it's not all of who I am.
You feel like it's more one-dimensional?
No, it's not even one-dimensional, because I think, I'm really caring on there. I think that I can be, I feel like I'm giving you levels, but you can't know the fullness of anyone from, 45 minutes of a TV show. Like everyone, I mean, that's like, and also, we're shooting like, we shoot like 5 days a week for like 6, 7, 8 hours a day. So there's a lot of hours that you're on camera that gets edited down to 45 minutes. So it's kind of giving you like the highlight reel of like the best of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like why, I am more open about like mess ups, my past, like, things that I've learned. And I try to be more upfront about the fullness of who I am, because I don't want people to be surprised when they realize that I'm like not always such a beacon of light. And I do struggle. And I think that positivity, and even like, how you show up in the world, it's like, I think this is true of like masculinity and femininity. Like you think that masculinity is like more strong and that femininity is more like, a quiet strength or something. Most men could never wear what I'm wearing. I'm wearing heels today. I'm wearing this dress, could never walk down the street. Like the bravery that it takes to express my femininity, like the courage, the strength, the resilience, like most men could never, but that's considered feminine. But I think I see so much masculine traits that are in femininity.
I wanted you to come on my podcast. I think the email that I got was even about your hairline or something. I was like, I want JVN on the pod. And then, you did that Armchair Expert pod, and I thought you were potted out. I was like, it's not going to happen.
No.
But you're not potted out.
You can never pod me out.
You can never pod you out. Can't pod out a pod house. So what can you just tell us about that? Like, are you and Dax good? Did the internet take it to, was the internet crazy, divisive?
Well, the internet is crazy and divisive.
Yeah.
I think Dax and I are good. I haven't spoken with him since. It felt fine. It felt okay. Actually, didn't feel that good. And also it was really edited. And also I really asked for, like, I just wanted insight, because like obviously that was a pretty intense conversation.
Yeah.
I had a feeling that it would be edited. I just wished that I could have had a transcript or like had insight into what that edit would be. And, I asked for that and wasn't given that. And so, as someone who's been hosting a podcast for 8 years, like I do transcripts. I let my guests read the transcript. I just, that part was kind of hard. There was some stuff that I said about
people noticed that though, just
No,
the internet did notice that.
I know, but I just, that part I was just like, but he's nice. Chris, I have a lot of respect for him. I will say this: I thought he was very brave to release it. I thought that he
could have edited his. He could have.
To be clear, he was very edited.
Yeah,
that was not exactly
what went down.
Yeah, I would say it was worse.
You thought he might not release the episode.
Yes. If a more accurate edit existed, I think you would see why I cried.
Right. That's what people were talking about. And I heard it too. When you broke down yeah, the listeners didn't at that moment. I mean, it made sense that you would break down because of the whole conversation. You said, I'm just exhausted. I'm exhausted from having to defend these kids and I'm, exhausted.
But you know what I was also?
And the amount of knowledge
but
you
I was really
spewed.
exhausted from the gaslighting.
Mm.
It was really gaslighty to say, I can agree with you on 9 of 10 things, but then I disagree on one thing and you're going to label me. Well, he wasn't agreeing with me on 9 of 10. He was actually disagreeing with me on every single thing I said.
You called him your dad. You were like, I feel like I'm talking to my dad.
I did. And every single thing I said, he had pushback. Every single thing. And I thought it was interesting for someone with a anthropology degree from whatever, like in Kleinfelters or whatever. It's like, I was absolutely right about my intersex statistics, which they went on to say in their fact check, and then really didn't spend any more time on that. And, he dressed me down for that, said it was wrong. I also thought it was funny, and this wasn't edited, this was true. I said, transphobes would say that this is an overly blown number. And then he immediately said, well, I do think that's an overblown number.
Right.
And he was completely wrong. And I just, for that. And I also just think there's a world where like a second conversation would be nice privately, where a more genuine apology and ownership for.
Did you expect that to happen? Like, were you like, I'm going to get an email?
A little, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I thought that there would be a reach out.
Uh-huh.
I feel like if I had someone into my home to have a podcast and,
made them feel bad.
Not made them feel bad. I mean, he was a lot more animated in real life. I mean, I almost got up and left twice.
Wow.
It was intense.
Why didn't you? Like, what stopped you?
Because I was sitting in fucking Dax Shepard's house. Like, you're not sitting in an office like this. You're like literally in someone's house. You don't really feel like you're in your power.
Did you know of him? But like,
of course,
like
I followed him on Instagram for 15,000 fucking years. I'm a huge fan of his wife. It was just like very unexpected
and disappointing.
Not disappointing. It was just unexpected. I think what really made me emotional, other than the gaslighting part, is that like when I realized like how committed people are to like narratives that they've been exposed to, whether or not they're like true. Like you get exposed to these headlines and these narratives around transphobia or about, fairness in women's sports or, kids transitioning, blah, blah, blah. And then people think they're so right, but they can really be so wrong. And I'm like, wow, this is someone who considers themselves an ally. And this is how they're talking. It's like our community has so much to overcome.
Yeah.
And that's what I was really stressed out about. I was like, oh my God, like it was just washing over me. Like in that moment, I'm like, but I did say in the conversation, I love these conversations, but I just didn't realize it was going to go, so intense. But definitely not potted out. I think Dax is really sweet. I think he's very sweet. I don't think he means harm. I will say that. He does not mean harm. And I thought it was brave to release the episode. And I'm glad that he allowed for so many more people to be exposed to that conversation.